If you retire with $1 million, the smartest thing you can do is keep your mouth shut. Not because people will hate you, not because you'll look arrogant, but because the moment you tell someone, your retirement quietly becomes more fragile. Most people think the danger is obvious. They imagine friends asking for money, family members expecting help, strangers see you as rich. That's not the real reason. The real reason is far more subtle and far more dangerous because it doesn't feel like a threat at all. If you retire with $1 million, you expect freedom, you expect relief, you expect peace. But what you often get instead is pressure, invisible pressure, the kind that slowly changes how you think, how you spend, and how you see yourself. And it starts the moment other people know your number. Here's what almost no one tells you about retirement with $1 million. $1 million is not rich. It's not poor either. It's something much more unstable. It's enough to stop working, but it's not enough to absorb repeated mistakes, emotional decisions, or social pressure. That's why silence matters. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth most retirees discover too late. Money behaves differently when other people are aware of it. When no one knows what you have, your money works quietly in the background. It compounds. It supports your life. It stays neutral. The moment people know, your money becomes part of your identity, and that changes everything. Imagine this scenario. You retire at 60 with $1 million invested. You tell your siblings. You tell a few close friends. You don't brag, you just mention it casually. At first, nothing changed. Then small things start happening. Someone jokes about you being set for life. Someone else says you're lucky you don't have to worry anymore. A family member asks your opinion about a financial decision and hints they wish they were in your position. None of this feels dangerous, but your brain is listening, and slowly your self-image shifts from a person managing resources to a person who should be fine. That belief is the first crack. Because once you believe you should be fine, you stop being precise. You loosen up just a little. You spend a bit more freely. You worry a bit less about small leaks. You say yes a bit more often. Not because you're reckless, but because expectations have changed. And expectations are powerful. Here's the part no one prepares you for. Other people's expectations don't just affect how they treat you, they affect how you treat yourself. When people know you have $1 million, they unconsciously assign you a role. You become the stable one, the safe one, the person who doesn't need to stress. So when something goes wrong, you feel less justified worrying about it. When markets drop, you tell yourself it's fine. When expenses rise, you assume you'll adapt. When returns underperform, you delay adjusting. After all, you're the one with money. You're supposed to be okay. This is how retirees drift into danger without ever making a dramatic mistake. But the pressure doesn't stop there. Once people know, comparisons begin. Even if no one asks you for $1, they still compare their life to yours. And comparison creates silent obligations. You feel awkward talking about financial stress because you're doing better than most. You downplay concerns, even when they're valid. You hesitate to say no to group expenses, trips, or celebrations, because saying no now feels like a statement. It feels like you're breaking character. So instead, you absorb the cost quietly. One dinner here, one trip there, one "it's fine" after another. None of these will ruin you on their own, but retirement isn't about one expense, it's about decades of decisions. This is where the psychology turns dangerous.
$1 million can support a disciplined lifestyle for a long time, but it cannot support identity inflation. And once people know your number, identity inflation is almost guaranteed. Here's why. Human brains are social before they're logical. We constantly adjust our behavior to match how others see us. If others see you as secure, you act more secure. If others see you as wealthy, you behave less cautiously. If others assume you're comfortable, you stop protecting margins. This isn't a weakness, it's biology. And retirees are especially vulnerable because they've lost one key anchor, a paycheck. When you were working, income corrected mistakes. It covered small overspending. It masked inefficiencies. In retirement, every decision matters more, which is exactly why external pressure is so dangerous. Now let's address the myth directly. Most people think the big risk is people asking you for money. That does happen, but it's not the main threat. The main threat is that you start acting like the money is already spent. Not literally, psychologically. Once people know you have $1 million, that money stops feeling like a fragile engine that must last decades. It starts feeling like a cushion. And cushions invite weight. You lean into them. You relax. You compress future risk into present comfort. And the scariest part is that it feels responsible. You're not buying sports cars. You're not going wild. You're just being generous. You're just enjoying life. You're just doing what someone in your position should do. But retirement math is unforgiving. A few percentage points of extra spending, a few years of underperformance, a few unplanned obligations. That's all it takes. Here's another uncomfortable truth. When people know your net worth, they stop seeing your time the same way. Your time becomes flexible in their eyes. You're retired, after all. You're free. So they expect availability. They expect help. They expect participation. This leads to a subtle shift. You spend more time accommodating others. You travel on their schedules. You adjust plans to keep harmony. These choices often cost money indirectly. More convenience spending, more last-minute arrangements, more might-as-well expenses. Again, nothing dramatic, just erosion. And because it's social, you don't track it the same way. You don't feel like you're spending on yourself. You feel like you're maintaining relationships, which makes it even harder to cut back later.
This is why silence is not secrecy. It's insulation. When no one knows your number, your money remains a private tool. It serves your life, not your image. You can say no without explanation. You can worry without embarrassment. You can adjust without feeling like you're failing expectations. That freedom is worth more than most people realize. Now let's talk about something even more subtle. The way telling people changes your internal risk tolerance. Before retirement, risk feels abstract. After retirement, risk becomes personal. Your portfolio isn't just numbers anymore. It's your future meals, your health care, your housing, your independence. When no one knows your net worth, you feel free to be conservative. You feel allowed to protect what you've built. But once people know, conservatism can feel like fear. You hesitate to rebalance. You hesitate to downshift lifestyle. You hesitate to admit uncertainty, because everyone assumes you've got it figured out. This pressure pushes retirees into staying invested in strategies longer than they should, or maintaining spending levels that no longer make sense. Not because they're greedy, but because they don't want to contradict the story others believe. This is the real trap. Retirement isn't destroyed by greed. It's destroyed by quiet conformity, by living up to a role you never consciously chose. That role begins the moment you say the number out loud. Now here's the part that really matters. The goal of retirement is not to look financially successful. It's to remain financially solvent. Those two things are not the same. One requires discipline. The other requires performance. And performance is exhausting. Silence gives you permission to prioritize survival over appearance. It allows you to shrink your lifestyle if needed. It allows you to change plans without explaining yourself.
It allows you to protect your downside without social friction. That is real wealth. Most financial damage in retirement doesn't come from strangers. It comes from people you love. That's hard to accept because the intentions are good. No one is trying to ruin your retirement. They're just reacting to what they believe about your situation. And what they believe changes the moment they know you retired with $1 million. Family dynamics shift instantly. You may not notice it right away, but roles begin to rearrange themselves. You become the reference point, the backup plan, the quiet safety net no one talks about directly. Even if no one ever asks you for money, something else happens. Your financial boundaries become less visible. Before retirement, everyone knows you have limits: a job, bills, responsibilities. After retirement, especially with $1 million, those limits blur. People assume flexibility. They assume options. They assume margin. So when life hits them, their brain doesn't ask, "Should I handle this myself?" It asks, "Is there someone who can help?" And because they love you, they don't see it as exploitation. They see it as a connection. This is where many retirees get trapped. Helping once feels harmless. Helping twice feels kind. Helping repeatedly starts to feel expected. But expectations are rarely spoken out loud. They live in tone, in pauses, in disappointment when you hesitate. And because these are people you care about, you don't want to be the reason they struggle. So you step in, not dramatically, not with big checks, just small supports, covering a shortfall, paying for something this one time, helping bridge a gap. You tell yourself it's manageable, and it is, first. But retirement is not about whether something is affordable today. It's about whether it's sustainable for decades. And emotional spending is the hardest spending to control because it doesn't feel like spending. It feels like being a good person. Here's the psychological trap. Every time you help, you reinforce a pattern, not just for them, for yourself. You become the kind of person who helps, the reliable one, the steady one. That identity feels good, but it quietly erodes your financial edge. Because now saying no doesn't just mean protecting your money, it means breaking a pattern. It means disappointing someone. And humans will sacrifice long-term safety to avoid short-term discomfort almost every time. This is why silence at the beginning matters so much. If people never know your number, they never build assumptions around it. They don't calculate your capacity in their heads. They don't mentally allocate your money before you do. Your resources stay invisible, and invisible resources don't attract emotional claims. Now, let's talk about something even more dangerous than helping others: lifestyle drift. Most retirees believe lifestyle inflation ends when work ends. In reality, it just changes shape. Instead of upgrading cars or homes, retirees upgrade expectations: better trips, more convenience, higher comfort. And when people know you retired comfortably, those expectations are reinforced from the outside. Someone suggests a nicer restaurant because you can afford it, a more expensive vacation because this is your time, a premium option because why not enjoy it? None of these suggestions sound irresponsible. They sound earned, deserved, and that's the problem. Because retirement spending driven by entitlement is much harder to reverse than spending driven by necessity. Once you normalize a certain level of comfort, stepping back feels like loss, even if it's the logical move, even if it protects your future. Silence protects you from this social inflation. When people know your number, suggestions stay neutral. You choose based on your priorities, not their assumptions. And that brings us to one of the most overlooked dangers of telling people your number. You stop testing your assumptions.
When no one knows your finances, you stay mentally engaged, you monitor, you adjust, you stay curious. But once your status is socially secure, questioning yourself feels unnecessary. You trust that you've already won, and that belief can be fatal.
Markets don't care about your confidence. Inflation doesn't care about your reputation. Longevity doesn't care about your optimism. Retirement fails when vigilance fades. And vigilance fades fastest when everyone around you thinks you're fine. Here's a scenario that plays out more often than people admit. A retiree shares their net worth early. They feel proud, relieved. Years later, returns disappoint. Costs rise faster than expected. Healthcare expenses creep in. They notice the squeeze, but instead of adjusting immediately, they delay. Why? Because adjusting would require explaining. Explaining why they're traveling less. Explaining why they're cutting back. Explaining why things feel tighter than people expect. So they stretch instead. They pull from investments a little more aggressively. They postpone uncomfortable changes. They hope markets recover soon. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they don't. By the time the situation becomes undeniable, the damage is already done. This is why privacy is not about hiding wealth, it's about preserving flexibility. Flexibility is the most valuable asset in retirement. More valuable than returns, more valuable than status, more valuable than comfort. Flexibility lets you respond early instead of late, and early responses are cheap. Late responses are expensive. Another overlooked effect of telling people is how it changes advice you receive. Once people know you have $1 million, their advice shifts. They stop being cautious on your behalf. They encourage spending. They minimize risks. They suggest living a little. Even professionals can fall into this trap. When advisors sense confidence, they mirror it. When clients seem relaxed, warnings soften. You get reassurance instead of challenge. But retirement requires the opposite. It requires brutal honesty. It requires uncomfortable conversations. It requires acknowledging uncertainty. Those conversations are easier when no one expects you to be invincible. And let's address the elephant in the room. $1 million is not what it used to be. It sounds large, it feels large, but spread over 25 or 30 years, adjusted for inflation, taxes, and healthcare, it becomes very specific, very finite. The danger isn't that it runs out overnight. The danger is that it runs out quietly. And nothing accelerates quiet erosion like social pressure combined with optimism. Silence slows everything down. It gives you space to observe reality without noise, to make changes without commentary, to live within your plan, not within someone else's expectations. This doesn't mean becoming secretive or isolated. It means being intentional. You can share experiences without sharing numbers. You can be generous without setting precedents. You can enjoy life without advertising. The strongest retirees are not the ones who look the most comfortable. They're the ones who remain adaptable. And adaptability thrives in privacy. The biggest mistake retirees make is believing the goal is comfort. It's not. The real goal of retirement is control. Control over your time. Control over your decisions. Control over how you respond when reality changes. And nothing destroys control faster than being trapped inside a story you can't easily exit. When you tell people you retired with $1 million, you step into a story where you're safe, a story where you're done worrying, a story where things should work out. At first, that story feels reassuring,
But over time, it becomes a cage, because when the story no longer matches reality, you're the one who feels pressure to perform. This is the final psychological reason silence matters. Privacy protects your internal authority. When no one knows your financial situation, you remain the final decision maker. You don't have to justify choices. You don't have to explain trade-offs. You don't have to defend caution. You simply act. That ability is priceless. Here's the shift that separates retirees who thrive from those who quietly struggle. Thriving retirees don't think of their money as proof of success. They think of it as a fragile system, a system that must be protected from volatility, emotion, and interference. Once you adopt that mindset, silence becomes obvious. You wouldn't invite extra variables into a system designed to last decades. You wouldn't add noise. You wouldn't add pressure. You'd simplify. You'd insulate. You'd reduce exposure. Social exposure is still exposure. Every expectation placed on your money increases the chance of deviation from your plan. And deviation, not disaster, is what ruins retirements. Disaster is rare. Drift is common. Drift comes from small compromises, from delayed decisions, from emotional spending, from social obligations that feel harmless in the moment. Silence prevents drift. It keeps your system clean.
Now let's talk about peace. Most people assume peace comes from having enough money. In reality, peace comes from not having to perform financial confidence. When no one knows your number, you can be honest with yourself. You can acknowledge fear without shame. You can plan for the worst cases without embarrassment. You can prepare without feeling pessimistic. This honesty leads to better decisions, and better decisions compound. There's a reason the calmest retirees are often the quietest ones. They're not hiding. They're protecting their mental bandwidth. They're not managing impressions. They're managing reality. Here's the paradox. The more people know about your financial situation, the less free you are. The less people know, the more room you have to adjust, adapt, and survive long term. This isn't about distrust. It's about alignment. Your retirement plan was built around your life, not theirs. And the moment others know the details, their lives start interacting with your plan, even indirectly, even unintentionally. That interaction introduces friction. Friction increases error. Error compounds over time. Silence removes friction. Now let's close the loop. If you retire with $1 million, you've done something impressive. You've earned security, flexibility, and choice. But that achievement doesn't need an audience. In fact, it's safer without one. The strongest position in retirement is not being seen as wealthy. It's being seen as normal. Normal people can say no. Normal people can adjust. Normal people can change plans without explanation. Normal people don't carry invisible expectations. Normal people don't feel pressure to maintain an image. Normal people can protect their downside quietly. And in retirement, protecting the downside is everything. Because you only fail once. You don't need to optimize forever. You just need to not run out. Silence helps you do that. Not by making you secretive, but by keeping your money where it belongs, in the background, working quietly, supporting your life without shaping it. If you take one thing away from this, let it be this. Your net worth is a tool, not an identity. The moment it becomes part of how others see you, it stops serving you as effectively. Keep it private. Keep it boring. Keep it invisible. That's how you protect not just your money, but your freedom, your peace, and your future.